White House has spoken to this. Technically, we were in compliance. We'll leave it to the Hill on whether 48 hours constituted a problem or not. But the 4th was the trigger date.
Wow, I wish my editors had your sense of deadline.
Thanks. Can you just say how this furthers the peace process?
The President believes taking this issue, that is the fact of U.S. recognition, acknowledgement of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, an issue that's been pending out there since 95. Since the act was initially passed, was appropriate to make, and that it helps in the process to no longer have that issue, which is the U.S. acknowledgement of the simple fact that Jerusalem is the location of the Supreme Court, the Knesset, the President and the Prime Minister's residences, that is a useful clearing of an issue that has been grown as part of this process for many decades.
So it's setting us up for what? If you're saying that gets that out of the way and it's been a reality, how does that set the stage?
The President and his peace team have been engaged, as you all know, for many months now in discussions with the two parties, with regional states, with other key actors to try to advance a peace. This is not an easy process, it's a difficult one. But he believes this step assists in that process. I am not going to elaborate on that further.
And how would
the Palestinians said that the U.S. cannot anymore be a mediator in this peace process. So how do you think this presidential team can go forward and broker a deal if one of the two main actors doesn't want him as a mediator?
It will not surprise you to hear, after all these years, my response is we will judge parties by their actions rather than by statements.
Thanks.
Sorry, Rich. Yes.
As a veteran diplomat and representative of NEA, do you personally agree with the President's decision?
Oh, now. I am an employee of the U.S. government. I'm a Foreign Service officer. We all, and I speak of my boss, the Secretary, and the other principals of the U.S. government, we are all part of this team. This is a decision which we will work our best to execute in advance.
How long did NEA consult with the administration?
I'm not going to get into a tick-tock on this.
Do you believe that this decision in any way impairs the pursuit of peace by the United States?
We've made clear, the President has made clear, that he hopes it helps advance this process, helps move it forward.
That's not my question. My question is, do you think it in any way impairs the pursuit of peace? I know what you hope. I want to know if you think it has impaired your efforts.
I can't make that judgment at this point.
Not even given the negative reactions that you have seen in Arab capitals among some of your allies, let alone the Palestinians?
No. Again, we will judge by what actually happens with those parties as we deal with this process, as we carry on discussions with them. Again, we're not going to be driven by statements.
And one other question. Do you regard those portions of East Jerusalem that were occupied by Israel in 1967 as occupied territory?
The decision of the President is to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. The President has stated that that decision does not touch upon issues of boundaries of sovereignty or geographic borders. Full stop.
So it is still occupied territory in your view?
I have stated what the President's decision does and does not do.
Kylie from CBS. Thank you.
What is the current policy of the U.S. administration towards Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem?
As this decision had no impact on any issue other than the recognition or acknowledgement of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
No, but so
I've answered your question.
Could you follow up what the policy therefore is, even though it has not been
I'm not
impacted?
going to restate the policy at this point.
Can I just ask you, are you accepting the premise of the question that construction in East Jerusalem is settlement activity? I don't believe that.
What I am stating is an affirmative. The President's decision was a recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The President made clear issues that touch upon the boundaries of sovereignty, final status issues are not addressed by his decision.
I get it. The question is one of terminology. Fine. You call construction in the West Bank settlement activity, but not necessarily construction in East Jerusalem. That's just construction. It hasn't traditionally.
The president's decision did not touch on those issues.
Final question, Elise.
Could you explain the distinction between recognizing the capital and it not deciding anything on borders as it refers to a deal? Because if you're saying that this is a final status issue to be negotiated at the table, how does either A, this not prejudice a deal when Jerusalem is a final status issue, or B, how is it not a meaningless declaration that could be negotiated at the table? It has to be one or the other.
Elise, final status negotiations are going to deal with those boundaries of sovereignty, border questions that the president spoke to as not addressed by his recognition. The president thought it was the right thing to do for the United States after all these years to acknowledge the fact, the reality, that Jerusalem is the seat of government of the State of Israel, the capital of the State of Israel. That's it.
But respectfully, it's inconsistent with the idea that you would also be negotiating at the table unless you can acknowledge what we're all trying to get you to say, which you artfully
you may
are
well
not.
think that. Thank you.
But the idea that that Jerusalem is the capital, but perhaps in final status negotiations that it might be not the united capital.
Elise, I will only address one more point on this. What were the words the president used? It was a very simple statement: recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There are words you might want to put in there, he didn't. There are words you might want to take out, he didn't. That statement was very carefully made, as was the comment, we are not addressing by this decision final status issues.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Acting Assistant Secretary David Satterfield, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And your expertise, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, everybody. The rest of the world to cover, don't we?
Well, I still have some questions.
Okay. Okay, a couple things I'd like to start out with right now. First, I'd like to mention our co-hosting of a global forum on asset recovery and the run-up to International Anti-Corruption Day. As a part of a U.S. government-wide effort to combat corruption around the world, the United States co-hosted the inaugural Global Forum on Asset Recovery earlier this week at the World Bank in Washington. This major international event, which took place in the immediate run-up to the global commemoration of International Anti-Corruption Day, was co-hosted by the United Kingdom. In a signal of U.S. commitment to this cause, our top law enforcement official, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, took part in the forum. The forum's goal was to facilitate the continued recovery of stolen assets from 4 focus countries: Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Tunisia, and Ukraine. The United States will remain committed to fighting corruption internationally by building partner nations' capacity to investigate and prosecute graft, by cooperating with foreign partners to trace and recover public assets stolen by kleptocratic regimes, and by strengthening institutions to prevent corruption. Second matter is that Secretary Tillerson, as you all know, is still on his Europe travel. Yesterday, Secretary Tillerson continued his engagements in Brussels, participating in the NATO-Georgia Commission meeting and the North Atlantic Council Foreign Ministerial. He also held meetings with his British and Turkish counterparts. In the meetings, the Secretary once again reaffirmed the United States' ironclad commitment to our NATO allies and the security of Europe, and he welcomed the growing number of NATO allies who are meeting at their burden-sharing commitments. If you haven't done so already, I'd suggest you review the transcript of the Secretary's press conference at NATO. Today in Vienna, Secretary Tillerson participated in the OSCE ministerial and highlighted ways to deepen cooperation on regional and global security challenges. He once again called for the full restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity through the implementation of the Minsk agreements and reiterated the United States' commitment to seeing the peninsula return to Ukrainian control. The Secretary also held individual meetings with his Swedish, Austrian, Russian, and Ukrainian counterparts, as well as with the OSCE Secretary General Thomas Greminger. Finally, Secretary Tillerson will round out his trip tomorrow in Paris, where he will meet with senior foreign French officials to discuss deep cooperation on a range of global, regional, bilateral issues of mutual concern. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. But I think our acting assistant secretary handled everything that we're going to cover on Israel and the president's decision today.
Really? Because I'm more confused than I was before we started. I don't understand what the practical implications of this recognition are. It sounds to me from what Ambassador Satterfield said or didn't say in a very, very careful way that there are no practical implications as it relates to day-to-day diplomacy or operations of the consulate and embassy, and that what you have in fact done, or what the president has done, has recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, but not recognized what Jerusalem actually is. In fact, Ambassador Satterfield wasn't even able to say that you believe that Jerusalem is in Israel. It might as well be an amorphous blob that just shows up on kind of a map if you're not willing to talk about the specifics of what that actually means, what you mean when you say Jerusalem. And I'd just like to know, what is Jerusalem in Israel?
We recognize Jerusalem as the capital.
That is not my question.
We recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I'm not going to go on and excuse me, let me finish,
Okay.
and continue to answer the same things that he just answered for 20 minutes or so for all of you. There are some questions that you will rightfully have about passports, for example, about maps. Some of those things we are still working out. You will have questions about what happens with our consulate and our embassy. Some of those things we will still be working out. So I'm not going to have all the answers for you that you're looking today, but I think the president and his announcement was clear, and I think the assistant
like a
secretary
very
is
easy
fair.
question to answer. When President Trump visited the Middle East, and he went to the Western Wall and prayed, what country was he in?
I'm sure you think this is very cute, but
I don't think it's very
look,
cute. I think that you guys don't understand. I don't understand what it means to say that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel without saying what you believe Jerusalem to be.
Well, I think it also recognizes that the center of government is there and has been there since the founding of
That's
Israel.
absolutely 100% factual and correct. What country was the president in when he prayed at the Western Wall? What country was he
Some
in?
of these things, okay, perhaps, and we're not taking any position on the overall boundaries. We are recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Perhaps that's not enough of an answer that you are looking for, but I can assure you that an entire administration backed by the entire interagency process, which included not just the White House, but the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the National Security Council, the entire interagency process. Okay, you may think you're smarter than them, Matt Lee, but the entire interagency process fed into this, made its recommendations, and the president made his decision.
The entire interagency process appears to have come up with something that means absolutely nothing.
Matt, that is your opinion. That is your opinion,
Well,
but the president announced his policy, and we are pushing ahead with that policy.
Okay.
Saeed, go ahead.
That actually touches myself and my family and others and so
I
on.
understand.
Because on our passports, where it says place of birth, country of birth, it says Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't have a country to say, I was born in Jordan or I was born in Palestine. The Palestinians of a certain age are not allowed to state Palestine as their place of birth on their American passport. So what they should do, how will they handle such an issue?
Yeah, and
myself included.
that is a fair question. As you well know, this policy was just announced yesterday. Okay, we all like to get ahead of ourselves and ask a lot of questions that are complex. Of course, that is understandable. A lot of these are part of the interagency discussions. Lawyers have to weigh in. A lot of government officials have to weigh in. And some of this stuff is just frankly still being worked out. At this time, I can tell you there are no changes to our current practices regarding the place of birth on consular reports of birth abroad and also U.S. passports. The decision, we believe, will ultimately rest with the president. Okay?
So do you think that given that it's still being worked out, does the secretary feel
On the issue of passports, you mean?
and other aspects of this, including what is Israel, what is Jerusalem exactly? But is
the capital of Israel? I think we established that.
Oh my gosh! Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done now. Does the secretary Does the secretary feel then that this just adds confusion to the issue and adds tension in the region?
I don't think so. Look, this administration is committed to working toward peace in the region. We have had Mr. Kushner and also Mr. Greenblatt and also our ambassador hard at work, backed by the State Department, on this issue since day one of this administration. That will not change. That is continuing.
Can you say what progress they've made? How would the State Department characterize any progress that they have been able to make?
Well, a lot of those are diplomatic conversations that are taking place.
Have they made progress?
They have all, and yes, when you talk with them, and I talk with them very often, as do other people at the State Department, they say that they have made progress. Some of this stuff we are not going to reveal. They are hopeful. Obviously, it has taken decades and decades of work by very many good people of both parties, Republicans and Democrats, who have tried to bring peace to the Middle East. For many years, that has failed. This administration is recommitted to trying to achieve that, and those conversations are ongoing. Some days are better than others, but the conversations are ongoing, and we will continue working at that.
And how does the secretary feel about the reaction that we've seen in the region, both on paper and now on the street?
Reaction in terms of what?
To this decision in the region.
Yeah, I think overall, while there have certainly been, and we believe in the rights of free speech, while there certainly have been people who have not been pleased with the overall decision, we have had many conversations, the U.S. government has, with our counterparts overseas. The president has, the vice president has, Secretary Tillerson has, as have staff members here in Washington as well. We have conversations. The foreign governments know exactly where we stand. We're not always going to see eye to eye with every government around the world, but the president made his decision. He made this decision, and that is what it is, and that's what we're going forward with. And then we're going to switch on to another topic. We're going to switch on to another topic.
Just one thing.
No. I'm sorry.
You asked a lot of questions already.
U.S.
Hi, Elise.
Hi. There are European allies that the secretary met with over the last couple of days. Most of them, including their leaders, have come out against this decision. The EU foreign policy chief also said that this kind of delegitimizes the U.S. in terms of being an honest broker. How much of the secretary's time over in Europe right now is being kind of sucked up by this?
As you well know, the secretary has had a very robust grouping of meetings as he's been in Europe. He has talked about many issues, including Ukraine, including JCPOA and Iran. He has also talked about this issue with his foreign counterparts. In terms of a percentage, I'm not going to put a percentage of his time that he has spent on this, but he did have some face-to-face conversations with some of his counterparts about this issue. But there are many important issues facing the United States. We have a whole world to deal with. Okay, let's switch on to something else because I don't have anything else for you on this. We'll go to Iraq. Hi. Excuse me. Okay, last one, then we'll go on to Iraq.
President Putin just spoke to President Erdogan of Turkey, and in their subjects of talk, the one was promoting the resumption of Palestine-Israeli talks. Where does U.S. stand on this?
On whose talks? Between the United States, Israel, and the Palestinians?
Russians and Turkey. They talked and they decided that they're going to promote the resumption of peace talks. So what is your reaction to that?
That Russia and Turkey would engage in talks? I would just refer you to those governments then.
No,
okay.
What is your reaction to that? That where does the U.S. stand so far as the peace talks are concerned?
As far as peace talks are concerned, between the United States talking with the Israel...
Palestinian and Israelis.
Between the Palestinians and Israel, I think I've answered that with Michelle already, that we have people who are hard at work on that issue every single day, from Jason Greenblatt to Jared Kushner to our Ambassador Friedman, always backed by the State Department. Those conversations are ongoing. They will continue. We are optimistic about those conversations. We know that other countries and some of our partners overseas may have a different point of view on this, but we are committed to peace, and that has not changed. Okay, let's move on to something else. Go ahead, Iraq.
No double standard.
Go ahead, Iraq.
No double standard question, please, if I may. It's related to this, and
I'll come back to you then.
The German foreign minister and the French president have both called on Baghdad reduce the role over time of the Popular Mobilization Forces with an eye to eliminating them over time. What's your position on that issue?
So in Iraq, the Popular Mobilization Forces are administered by or fall under the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister controls those forces under Iraqi law. So whether or not other countries like that or don't like it, it is Iraqi law, and we believe in sovereignty.
So you don't see the possibility that they may formally be under Iraqi law, but really subordinate, following direction from Iran and Qasem Soleimani in particular?
I think that would be an internal Iraqi matter. We've talked about this before. The Prime Minister knows how to best manage his security forces, but under Iraqi law, they fall under the Prime Minister.
And am I correct then to understand that there's this difference of opinion on this issue between you on the one hand and the French and Germans on the other?
I'm not aware of any conversations that the United States has had between France and, you said Germany also. I'm not aware of any conversations that we've had about the status of the PMF. Okay?
No double standard?
Okay, anybody else? Fine. Anything else on Iraq? Okay.
On Yemen, President Trump.
Okay, yes. Yes.
Because it was related to the Israeli-Palestinian stuff.
I understood. Okay, I had called.
Hold on. You tend to like keeping things together.
I do. I called on Lori, and so just hold on. I'll call on you now. Go right ahead.
So a cable went out to all U.S. diplomatic and consular missions yesterday that asked State Department officials to defer all non-essential travel to the entirety of Israel, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. Normally, when you are discouraging American officials from going to a particular area, under the no double standard rule, you make that public to all U.S. citizens so that they have the same information. I read through the travel warnings on Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza yesterday, both in the middle of the day and then at the end of the day after the worldwide caution, and I saw no similar warning to U.S. citizens or advice to U.S. citizens to defer non-essential travel to those areas. Why did you say one thing in private to U.S. officials and another thing, and not say the same thing in public to U.S. citizens?
Let me state the kinds of communication that we have put out to American citizens and also to U.S. government officials. And one of the things we often say here is that the safety and security of Americans is our top priority. There are top policy priorities, but that is our overarching most important thing, the safety and security of Americans. We put out a security message to U.S. citizens on the 5th of December. On Monday, I believe that was. We put out a security message to our U.S. citizens that day. That was Tuesday? Okay, thank you. On the 5th of December, we put out another one on the 6th of December as well, expressing our concerns. We want to alert people to any possible security situations out of an abundance of caution. That information was put, as I understand it, on the State Department website, but it was also issued by many of our posts overseas in areas where we thought there could be something that could come up. In addition to that, there is a travel warning that goes out regarding this region. That is something that is updated every 6 months, I believe it is. This travel warning for the region has been in effect for several years, so that is nothing new. In addition to that, we put out a worldwide caution. That is updated every 6 months. We had a worldwide caution in place for several years, but yesterday, out of an abundance of caution, we updated it. As far as I'm aware of, and I won't comment on any of our internal communications to say whether or not there were any of these internal communications, because we just don't do that on any matter. But I think that we've been very clear with Americans, whether they work for the U.S. government or whether they're citizens traveling somewhere, about their safety and security. This is also a great reminder for any Americans traveling anywhere around the world to sign up for the State Department's STEP program, which enables us to contact American citizens wherever they are traveling in the case of an emergency if we need to communicate with them.
But why did you tell your officials not to travel to those areas between December the 4th and December the 20th and not tell American citizens the same things? Because you didn't tell that to American citizens in all of the messages that you put up on the embassy website, on the consulate website, nor did you tell American citizens that in the worldwide caution, nor did you tell them that in the link to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza that was put out by the State Department in the worldwide caution yesterday. You're telling your people inside one thing, and you're telling American citizens a different thing. And under your own rules, there's supposed to be no double standard. Why didn't you tell U.S. citizens the same thing you told
Again,
U.S. officials?
unfortunately, just as State Department policy, we don't comment on whether or not there was an official communication regarding this. But I can tell you, as a general matter, I think we've been very clear about the security concerns regarding Americans. We have put out those three various subjects or types of communications to American citizens who are traveling in areas that could be affected.
I'm gonna ask
in
you-
terms of the U.S. government, when we talk about the U.S. government deferring non-essential travel, I would hope that people would not travel for non-essential reasons, just as a general matter anyway.
But why, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical, which I would ask you to entertain.
I'll listen to it. I'd be happy to listen to it.
If there were such communication, and every U.S. diplomat who gets in all DAC, which means every other person who works at the State Department, knows that this communication went out. So if there were such communication, why would you say one thing to your own officials and a different thing to American citizens, which is what the law and your own rules require?
As you well know, we have a no double standard. And for folks who aren't familiar with what that means, it's when we tell our staff something about a particular area or security threat, we also share that same information with the American public. I would find it hard to imagine that our lawyers have not gone through things to try to make sure that we are all on the same page with the information that we provide to U.S. government officials as well as American citizens. And that's all I have for you on that. Okay, let's move on to something else. Yeah, Yemen?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
President Trump yesterday instructed the administration to ask the Saudis to let humanitarian aid immediate access to Yemen. Did you at State Department talk with the Saudis, and if yes, what was their answer and what are the results of these conversations?
I can tell you that the U.S. government has had a series of conversations with the officials in Saudi Arabia. Let me start by saying, and I want to raise this issue with everyone because we have all followed the death of Ali Abdullah Saleh, the former president of Yemen. Let me start by saying that we are extremely concerned about the increase in violence in Yemen. That has not gotten a ton of coverage in the news recently, although I know you are all interested in it. I want to be clear in stating that we call on all parties there to reject the use of violence against their political opponents. I will get back to your humanitarian aid question in just a minute, but I wanted to highlight this because the situation is so dire, and the more that we see violence take place, the worse the situation can become for civilians, in particular for women and children. We are particularly concerned by the reports of Houthi actions in Sana'a, including the unlawful killings, the mass detentions, and the violent suppression of peaceful protests. An enduring solution to the conflict and the dire humanitarian situation will not be reached militarily. We have said that again and again. All sides must agree to immediate cessation of hostilities and return to UN-mediated negotiation toward a comprehensive political agreement. A political solution is the only way to advance long-term stability in Yemen. The president issued a statement yesterday. He had directed administration officials to call on the leadership of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to request that they completely and immediately allow food, fuel, water, and also medicine to reach the Yemeni people who need it so desperately. The Secretary has consistently expressed his concern about Yemen's humanitarian crisis to the Saudis, and the administration will discuss the President's message directly with Saudi leadership in the near future. I don't have any calls or readouts to provide to you on this time, but this is something I can tell you. When I've sat in the meetings with Secretary Tillerson related to that region, it's always been an issue that he has brought up, the humanitarian situation, and he's called upon leaders in the region to use whatever influence they have to help with this humanitarian situation in Yemen.
But since yesterday's statement, there has been no new conversation.
I don't have any additional calls or any meetings or anything to read out for you on that. But the president issued his statement, and I think that was pretty strong. Okay. Anything else on Yemen?
Responded to you on the president's urge.
Not to my
Not-
knowledge. If I have anything for you on that, I can certainly check.
So is it the assessment that the Yemeni civil war has completely gone out of control?
Well, I think we're really concerned about the level of violence. I mean, we have talked since day one on my job here about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, and that the humanitarian crisis there is one that is man-made. You have men, women, and children starving, a tremendous food insecurity there. You have a cholera problem. You have the fighting, and now since the killing of the former president, you've seen additional civil unrest. It's a dire situation. We're tremendously concerned about that violence. But if we can get more humanitarian aid in there, that would be certainly a step in the right direction, and we're trying to push for that. Okay? Let's move on to something else. Hey there.
Cuba.
Okay.
Do you have an update for us on the situation of the health attacks against diplomatic personnel? And the ranking Democratic member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Engel, said that the Trump administration is leaving Congress in the dark.
Well, I can tell you this. We have the State Department, in addition to the U.S. government, from the FBI, Department of Justice, you name it. We have been engaged in having conversations with members of Congress. Some of those have been in a classified setting. Some have been in a more open setting. So I'm not sure which members have complained that they've not gotten enough information, but we have provided consistent briefings to Capitol Hill on this issue. Our investigation is still underway. Our Diplomatic Security Division is a part of that, along with DOJ as well. That investigation is still underway. The latest I can bring you, and I always tell you that I will bring you the latest updates on numbers. The numbers, thankfully, have not changed in terms of our colleagues and employees who have been affected by those health attacks. 24. That's where it stands right now. We continue to have people assessed and looked at. Those numbers could change, and I always say to you, and we tell folks on Capitol Hill this as well, if those numbers, God forbid, change, then we will bring you the new numbers. Okay? Okay. Anything else on Cuba?
On Cuba.
Cuba. Hi. Yeah.
On Cuba, I wanted to ask you, please, you mentioned there is a diplomat who's the chargé d'affaires, and I wanted to ask you about the former ambassador who has been traveling all over the world, but now he's in Cuba, Mr. Goldberg. He's been meeting with members of the civil society there. In what capacity is Mr. Goldberg there in Havana?
I don't have any information on Mr. Goldberg's schedule. I can't confirm that he's there right now, so I'm afraid I just don't have anything for you on that. Anything else that related to Cuba while we're talking Cuba? Do you have any other questions related to Cuba? No, we're done. Okay. Let's go on to DPRK then.
Korea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. On Korea, South Korean President Moon said that he could not tolerate the United States if preemptive strike against North Korea. How do you respond on this?
He said he could not tolerate what?
Tolerate the United States preemptive strike against North Korea.
I'm not aware of any that have taken place.
So, but if North Korea continue to threaten the United States with missiles or nuclears, that is the U.S. decisions. Whatever their
I go back to what I often say, and that is a hypothetical. I can tell you we have a very strong relationship with the Republic of Korea. It is an alliance relationship, as we do with Japan as well. That relationship is ironclad. If we should need to, we will always defend our allies.
Can you explain what is going on with this chatter from people about the Olympics? Yesterday, Ambassador Haley at the UN made some comment about it. This afternoon, Sarah Sanders at the White House made another comment about it. She later then clarified that comment. But is there any discussion that you're aware of the U.S. not or potentially not participating in the upcoming Winter Olympics?
Here's what I can tell you. Ambassador Haley spoke or issued a statement of sorts earlier today, and she further expanded on her remarks that she made yesterday in an interview about the Olympics. I can tell you the Republic of Korea has a long history of successfully hosting many major games. That also includes the Olympics back in 1988 when you were, 15?
15? You were 15 in 88? Okay. We have a long-standing and successful relationship with the Republic of Korea. We are confident that the government's commitment to hosting a safe and successful Winter Games will take place. We support their efforts in that, and that is all I have on that.
But so there is no discussion that you're aware of potentially not participating? 'Cause you didn't- that's the question, and your statement, what you have there, doesn't answer that question. It just talks about how the Koreans are wonderful hosts.
Well, they are certainly wonderful
Which they
hosts.
are,
Yes,
but
they certainly are.
That's not my question. You can be a wonderful host and
I
still
think
not
Ambassador Haley and the White House further clarified our position on this. We look forward to being a part of the Olympics in the Republic of Korea.
But North Korea is a terrorist country. But the South Korean government invited this terrorist country, it's Kim Jong-un's regime. But they continue to threaten with the nuclear issues. How are you gonna?
I will go back to say this: the safety and security of Americans is our top security priority. If for some reason we felt that Americans were in a dire danger in any place around the world, we would be very concerned about that, and we would take appropriate action. I don't have anything else for you on the Olympics.
Okay. Just the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov, told media that he had passed on the words about Pyongyang's desire to directly talk to the United States to Mr. Tillerson. So what is the answer from Mr. Tillerson?
Okay, that is something that Foreign Minister Lavrov said took place as a part of the conversation. I don't have anything on that particular part of the conversation, and I cannot confirm if that came up in the Secretary's conversation with Mr. Lavrov. I will say, though, as a general matter, the issue of direct talks with North Korea is not on the table until they're willing to denuclearize. It is something that Russia has said it agrees with. It is something that China has said it agrees with, and many other nations around the world as well. The DPRK is not showing any interest in sitting down and having any kind of serious conversations when they continue to fire off ballistic missiles. Period.
Something else that was supposed to come up during the Tillerson-Lavrov meeting that the your counterpart at the Russian Foreign Ministry made mention of at one of her briefings this week is this allegation by the Russians that U.S., the FBI, and other police organizations are harassing and attempting to recruit Russian journalists. Do you know anything about this?
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that.
Can you take a look at I'll send you something. The comment, the allegations are pretty odd, and your Russian counterpart.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well, your Russian counterpart said that Foreign Minister Lavrov, that they took them seriously enough that Foreign Minister Lavrov was going to raise this specific issue with Secretary Tillerson.
Look, I can tell you what information I got out of the Secretary's meeting with Mr. Lavrov today. I exchanged emails with a colleague of mine who was in the room at the time, and she told me this, quote, in plain spoken language, the Secretary told the Russian Foreign Minister that his country's invasion of Ukraine sovereign territory needs to be resolved before the two countries will ever be able to take steps to improve relations. If they talked about any other matters, I don't have that in my notes. Look, this is just what I have in my notes that was sent to me. There's a time change, obviously, between here and there. I got this note just as I was coming out here, so wanted to bring you that information that I have. Okay? Kylie, hi.
No, this is a little bit forward-looking, but we won't see you till Tuesday. There is a climate change summit next week in Paris, and it's the celebration of the 2 years of the Paris Agreement. Okay. Is the U.S. sending anyone from the State Department?
I'm not aware of that. This is the first I'm hearing of the climate change summit taking place next week. I can look into it and see if we're sending anybody.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Hey, sir, how are you?
Latvia.
Good to have you back.
Hi. It's very rare when political demonstrations in Latvia can even gather a few hundred people. But 3 weeks ago, in Latvia, there was a political rally in Riga protesting the plans of Latvian Ministry of Education to close down Russian language schools, and it gathered about a few thousand people. So the organizers cited Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. So just 2 days ago, the government of Latvia confirmed the plans to abandon the Russian language from educational process at schools. So the new political protests are being gathered right now, organized in Latvia, where around 40% of the population are actually Russian-speaking, in fact. So it might lead to creating one more point of instability in the world. So what's the State Department position on this issue?
Well, I can tell you we certainly don't want any more areas of instability in the world. We have enough right now to last us for quite some time. In terms of your specific question on what's going on in Latvia right now, with the language, I know we've seen that in other parts of the world. We've seen that certainly in Ukraine, where there's been a debate about that, in Hungary as well. I just don't have any information for you at the moment on Latvia, but I'd be happy to look into that and get back to you. Okay? This last question. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Munira Al-Mood with I-24 News.
Hi. I'm sorry, where's I-24 News based?
It's an Israeli-based international news channel.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So going back to the security of Americans being your top priority, the State Department has issued a worldwide caution for U.S. citizens traveling.
We already covered this, I'm afraid.
Okay, can you just tell us how did you choose these countries and why is it happening now?
Let me go back to my notes here and see if I can clarify this for you. So we updated our worldwide caution on December the 6th yesterday. It was updated with information on the continuing threat of terrorist actions, political violence, criminal activity against U.S. citizens and interests abroad. This is something that is updated every 6 months on the part of the U.S. government. It is a worldwide caution. We know that American citizens can be targets in many places around the world. In some instances, we've seen this time of year be one in which Americans have been attacked at the holiday times. The worldwide caution message is part of the Department of State's continuous efforts to provide U.S. citizens traveling abroad with information about safety and security events. A worldwide caution warns U.S. citizens to exercise a heightened level of caution and security awareness and is generally reviewed and updated at least every 6 months. We strongly encourage U.S. citizens traveling and residing abroad to enroll their travel plans in the STEP program. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. That's where you can register with the State Department to let us know where we can reach you if we should absolutely need to. Okay, thanks. Okay, final question.
Just real quick, do you have a response to this Reuters report that a Palestinian official says that Vice President Mike Pence is unwelcome in Palestine?
I'm not aware of that. You know, we have comments from officials all around the world, and I'm just not going to comment on everyone there.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
The White House just